Welcome, guys, back to the Grateful Living podcast. Today, I'm thankful to have David Zamarin with me today. David is a serial entrepreneur who first founded Lick Your Soul and now is currently running Detrapel. He was also named as a Forbes 30 under 30 for 2021. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, thankful to have you on. So, take us back to the beginning, where you grew up, your family situation, what type of kid you were, things like that.
Yeah, pretty loaded question. My parents were both immigrants from Soviet Union. They came here at a relatively young age. My parents were both, I think, 18 when they first arrived here. Met here in Philadelphia, which is where I was born. Then got divorced when I was 2, and my dad was on was more on the successful side. He was in real estate, mortgage brokerage, and in the stock market and stuff, financial markets. He was kind of the business influence early on in my life, whereas my mom was working in retail, and I was living with my grandparents because of that, because she was working like 17-hour shifts a day. So I was living with my grandparents for the first few years, and it was really tough seeing how my family grew up, but it got a huge push from my mom's side for education and eventually business as well. But had this really interesting dichotomy where I had an equally present kind of maternal side. My grandparents were very involved. My mom was obviously very involved. My dad was involved, but two different outlooks on life completely, or at least a lot different emphasis. They both cared about education, but my mom was like strictly education, and my grandparents were instilling education at first, and believed that there would be a time for everything else later. Whereas, I was getting multidisciplinary kind of introductions to business through my dad when he would take me to this office begrudgingly when I didn't want to go, but eventually I grew to love it. So that's kind of the short background.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, the divorce. You were relatively young, but you know, does do you what impact does that have on you as you grow up? Is it? I mean, are you more careful, with who you choose as a partner and things like that when you're? I mean, can you think of any effects that had on you?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a ton. It's what shaped my life. I wouldn't have it any other way, as cynical as that sounds. Obviously, I actually remember I was very young, but I do remember a lot of back and forth between my parents. My parents hate each other to this day, can't stand each other, and so for that reason, I was kind of caught in the middle, which was, in my opinion, unfortunate, but it did teach me a lot and taught me to be in just a completely different mindset. I had time and place to think one thing for one group of people and then another for the other group. And so, I mean, it was difficult growing up because I had to balance the two, and their mutual hatred was difficult to manage. I was constantly caught in the middle of it, even up until my recent college graduation. I mean, even that was stressful. I had to work my dad being around the rest of my family, and they didn't want to sit next to each other. I mean, it's a little childish, to be honest, but it is what made me who I am today. From a personal relationship standpoint, I would like to think that I know, or I have some kind of influence from their divorce, in the sense that I'm learning from it. I like to learn from others' mistakes a lot. It's a big theme in my life. So, um, and others' successes too, not just mistakes. But my mom remarried, and so did my dad eventually, but he had a second divorce. But my mom remarried, and my stepdad, who I have he essentially raised me as a kid too, and called me his own. So I had a very strong influence from there as well. And overall, I got two sides of the coin, and I was very fortunate in that front. I am recently married, so I hope I made the right
Congratulations.
decisions.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm hoping I'm making the right decisions, and I think I am, but only time will tell.
Yeah. Yeah. I know this is, you're not a psychologist or anything, but like, um, for any, younger kid that might be watching this, that might be in a similar situation, young kid, parents divorced, not the most healthy of relationship between each other. Any pieces of advice that you have on, I mean, I don't even on coping mechanisms or anything like that that you've picked up?
Um, I kind of had to, I was kind of forced to, and this is how I just was raised. My family was very, at least my mom was very tough love driven. So, I don't even remember saying like, or hearing I love you from my mom, or that she was proud of me up until like I graduated high school or something. So, or maybe even in college, I don't remember, but, it wasn't that prevalent in my family. Now it is. Now we're like obviously super close, but, you know, one thing I'm a big believer in is like everyone's got their own situation going around. Everyone's got pros and cons to their life, daily life on an everyday basis. And so when you start to realize that you are a lot more alike to others than you realize, it starts to kind of mold you to think differently. Because for me, I was highly motivated no matter what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be different. I didn't care to be like other kids. Um, Obviously, I still participated in like what regular kids did. Like I was an athlete. I didn't really play that many games or have quote unquote a social life or whatever, especially in college. But nonetheless, I think for me the coping mechanism was just realizing that understanding that there's a really deep reality in life, and that I was forced to grow up at a very young age because of this whole situation, and I'm happy about that. And for me, what it meant was, I just didn't want to necessarily be like them. And I also wanted to take their positives from both of them and implement that into my life. So I didn't really care or dwell on the fact that, my parents had a rough divorce. Yeah, I had some stressful moments here and there, but the reality was, for me, and I still believe this to this day, is like everyone's got their own sticky situation in life. Everyone's got a problem that they have to solve every day, and whether or not you choose to solve it is what's going to determine whether or not you have success or issues stemming from that issue, from that
Yeah,
problem.
that's great advice. Uh, you talked a little bit about it, but how big was the Russian background? Were you taught at a young age to like hate communism and things like that, or how?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. My parents are very big patriots. Granted, like I mean, we still, you know, the Russian background was and still is very prevalent. My wife is from the region too. She was born there. I wasn't, but like my point is that that stayed close to the family for cultural reasons. I mean, I was raised fluent in Russian. I could speak, read, and write. Um, and it was my first language. I actually went to kindergarten not knowing anything but my name.
wow.
Uh, yeah. So, Russian was very prevalent, especially because my grandparents only speak that. They have very little English knowledge. So, I found that as a positive. There's no negative to being multilingual or, having definitely multicultural diversity. I think that's important too, especially when you're trying to be empathetic with others. But from a patriotic standpoint, yeah, my parents are huge patriots, despise communism, despite everything that it
Yeah,
stands for. They left there for that reason.
yeah, yeah. So it was interesting doing some research on you because entrepreneurship came at a young point in your life, relatively to most people that I meet, and I'm curious, where did that itch come from? I mean, I'm not even sure if the term was even that big of a term,
It
as it
wasn't.
is, yeah, when you were growing up as a young kid. So, um, were you introduced to it, or was some like how did that come about?
Subliminally, I don't know where it came from. I had an entrepreneurial itch or like a bug or tendencies to be entrepreneurial from a very early age. When I was around 5 years old, I started selling popsicles to my friends, and my grandmother thought I was uh, giving them out for free. uh, and so, for me, when I was kind of growing up, I always had these tendencies, and I think that subliminally came from watching my parents struggle and work very hard, and particularly my mother. Um, I think when I got a little older, around fifth grade, which is when I started my first real business or first business, so to speak, where I was buying and selling headphones and Beats and G Shocks. watches and headphones at
Yeah.
flea markets. And for me, I asked my dad for $100 loan that summer. He gave it to me, and I bought a bunch of material and then kept flipping it. And eventually that summer I made like 10 grand, which was for me like a huge amount of money. I grew up, with my mom's side, I never saw a penny. Like, I mean, not, I'm exaggerating, but my point is, like, I grew up knowing what it meant to earn a dollar. So for me, that was a ton of money. And seeing as my dad was my investor, I gave him 50% of the cut.
Yeah.
He made out really well in that deal, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I was, that's kind of my first link into actually running, buying and selling and running a so-called business. I wouldn't call that a real business at the time,
Yeah.
but it was very similar to what a real business could be like, because of the way that I was able to get the material at a wholesale amount, because that was very unique. And so I think, but
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, so I think when I got a little bit older, I got a lot more guided steering from my dad. Again, seeing him working and seeing his office. I mean, for an immigrant, he was, in my eyes, when I reflect back on it, it's impressive what my dad was able to do as someone who came here literally with $100 in his pocket, with his grandmother, and he was taking care of both of them. And so, he's had many ups and downs, and I'm not saying my dad's decent now. He's not necessarily well off yet, but the point is that he, from a business perspective, was always motivated, was always doing something. And so that, to me, gave me some guided motivation and guided structure to what business meant. And then eventually, when I was a freshman, I can talk about that some more if you want, but when I became a freshman, that's when I first heard the word entrepreneur come about. And that's when I realized, okay, this is what I want to do.
I'm curious because, obviously a lot of people come from, backgrounds where they don't have a lot of money, but the the intellectualness that you had at fifth grade to then be like, let me create a buy and sell business. I mean, you know, where do you remember how you like? I mean, I guess you
Yeah.
saw it with the lollipops and things like that. You probably bought those and sold them individually. I mean, but where did that? I mean, because that's remarkable
Yeah, no,
brain power for a fifth
I
grader.
distinctly, I distinctly remember how I came across the whole business idea. And I was just watching someone else do it and do it successfully. I'm a big believer in, like, I don't necessarily always need to reinvent the wheel. I like learning from people. I've always been, my whole career in the last 10 years has been predicated on networking and learning and mentorship. I'm a sucker for mentorship. I have, like, I don't even know how to count how many mentors I have. I've got a lot of them, and close ones that I speak to on a weekly basis. And there's more than two handfuls of those. So for me, those types of interactions were very important, and that's kind of what guided me and started me onto the entrepreneurial career. And so I guess when I became older, I realized that I could learn from others and replicate their success. And so when I was in fifth grade, again, I was very motivated as a kid, and still am. Like, I always wanted to be independent and make a difference. And so for me, I had that component of it. That's not the part that I was lacking, but as a fifth grader, agreed, it's hard to find the resources and kind of ideas and execute on them. But I looked at what other people were doing, and I was, fanatic about Google, and I just researched and didn't take no for an answer. I didn't know what no meant. And there was, to me, in my mind, there was always a solution. I wasn't raised to give an answer of no. I was always questioned as a kid. Like, if I said I couldn't do something, I wasn't forced to do it. I was asked, why can't I do it? And I had to explain it. I had to sit there and formulate a reasonable response, and only then would it work. So I was just raised differently. And more importantly, I think, beyond being nurtured differently, I just genuinely really wanted to create a strong sense of independence.
Yeah. I'm curious, if you were growing up as a kid right now, or if someone else is out there that's young and, in a similar situation to the way you grew up, any how do you think you'd be, what would be your fifth grade activity today? Do you have any idea what you would be doing?
if I Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I mean, if it was me today, I'd probably want to go into like software in fifth grade or something. If I
Yeah.
could redo everything, that's what I would do. I would go into something related to software, because I think, software just has a wide adaptability and a wide net that can be cast to solve some grave issues. So don't get me wrong, I love what I do, and there's a big software component to how we built the business. But my point is that you can make it with anything. Like, don't get like, I want people to not forget, right? Like the second, or I guess the third richest, third or fourth, and success isn't necessarily always measured by wealth, but nonetheless, it's one of the main criteria on how to measure wealth. And so that said, when you look at LVMH and the founder or the CEO of LVMH being the third richest, third wealthiest individual off of a few fashion brands and an alcohol business, I mean, that goes to show that you can make it in whatever industry it is. It doesn't just have to be software like Amazon. It doesn't have to be, a revolutionary car business like Tesla. It doesn't have to be anything special necessarily. You just have to, it has to fold all together. It's when preparation meets opportunity, then you get luck.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess I saw several businesses as I think you were in high school, Prestige Valet Company,
Yeah.
Lick Your Soul. Um, Maybe just talk about um, what you were doing there, and um, I guess what those taught you, and uh, as you look back on them.
Yeah, for sure. There's good components to this. When I was again, from the education perspective, my parents pushed me pretty hard, and in sixth grade, I applied and was accepted into Masterman High School, or not Masterman Middle School, Julie Reynolds Masterman Middle School, and so that is one of the best schools in the country. They ranked like seventh last year. It's a public school, magnet school, super competitive, and I was very very fortunate that I was accepted in. And the middle school is quite competitive. You have to reapply to get into the high school, and only a third or half the kids were accepted. And it was already a very tiny school. It was 200 kids per grade in the middle school out of the entire city of Philadelphia,
Oh.
or the entire state of Pennsylvania. There's people that outside the city that attended as well. And that's, we're talking like 15 million people. I don't know how many
Yeah,
of those are kids.
yeah,
So, I mean, I'm sure, it's a much smaller amount for actual kids, but even call it a million kids. I mean, that's a lot of prospective students that could go to that school, and it's a top-notch school, or at least was when I was there. Can't speak for it now, but I was admitted, and I was focusing on education. I was running these side businesses, trying to buy and sell stuff, and then when I started reapplying for the high school, I was incredibly nervous. I thought I wasn't, I was a good student, but that's not enough necessarily. Again, when I looked at all my peers, we were all the same on paper, right? We were all fantastic students, great GPAs. Everyone was doing 20 different activities. Everyone had the musical instrument they played. Everyone did athletics. Like, everyone was the full package. It's exactly what you would expect out of a perfect population or sample group of who you would take for a school if you were trying to build the best possible school. That said, I was super nervous. And eventually, when I was admitted into the high school, I was quite relieved, but I realized that, hey, if I was this nervous about a high school, how am I going to be when I'm applying to college? And so I realized that, again, I'm very similar to all my peers, and I wanted to look outside the box. And so I was very fortunate. There was a program that was passed around, a flyer that was passed around for an out-of-school program that had nothing to do with the school, where it was a youth entrepreneurship program held at First Round Capital, which, for those that don't know, First Round Capital is a venture capital firm founded by Josh Koppelman, who sold Half.com to eBay for $350 million in like 2005 or 2004. And he's a world-renowned VC. It's one of the top 10 VC firms in the country. They've made all the major investments into Google, Uber, Facebook, you name it. They're all investors in those types of businesses. And so the program was not necessarily related to First Round. It was just held in their facility. But what that meant to me was I got to meet all these VCs. I got to meet new people 2 to 3 times a week. The program was just an incubator for brand new young entrepreneurs that wanted to start a business, and their tagline was "Start something real." And to me, that was like all I needed to hear. I knew that I wanted to start something real early on and be different. And if I was willing to work, because that's the one thing I realized when I was obsessed as a kid to read about people that were successful in whatever, again, their definition of success was. So when I looked at some of these publicly traded companies or privately held companies that were doing really well, or attorneys, I thought I was going to be an attorney my whole life, actually, in middle school and stuff, and prior to middle school. And so, and then eventually I switched to business attorney in the first year of high school, until I just realized I just want to be an entrepreneur. I want to make a big impact. And so for me, I was researching all these people. I did like 12 different internships during my high school career, all unpaid. I didn't believe in paid internships because I just wanted to learn. And so I did all these unpaid internships with law firms, startups, and every single commonality that I found between all these people, between all these overnight successes, was that it actually took them years, if not a decade, to get to their success. And so I was willing to start early to build the business for 5 to 10 years until I saw any gain back. And so I knew I needed to start at an early age. And so when I got into the high school and got into this program, I was infatuated with the fact that we were learning about business. I learned everything from the basics of starting an LLC to everything else. And I was sitting there, and the program, I think, was 2 or 3 times a week, but I would go there like 4 or 5 times a week. And I would just literally every time that we had a program, they would bring in new mentors from UPenn or Drexel or whoever. I mean, just, really other people that not necessarily were even successful, although they brought a lot of really successful individuals too, but just other people to get other thoughts. And what I did was I was so motivated by that I took every single person's business cards and followed up with every single person. And I was the only non-senior in the program. I was the youngest kid in the program. I was a freshman. And to me, I still to this day think I took it the most serious. And I think the program leaders would agree with that. Because I just fell in love with it. I bought into the entire entrepreneurial or entrepreneurship realm and dilemma and everything. I just fell in love with it. I made a lot of mistakes along the way, so I'm happy to touch on those, and a lot of personal mistakes too, not just business mistakes. I have a very different outlook on life that I now than I did then, obviously as a high school student. But I started Lick Your Soul. Going to actually answer your question.
No, you're fine.
I started Lick Your Soul because I was a freshman. When I got into high school, I got a gift from my grandparents. It's $200, and my freshman year, my ninth grade self thought that it'd be smart to buy Jordans, sneakers.
Yeah.
Because I was passionate about I was a sneakerhead at the time. So I was passionate about shoes, and I went and bought 2 pairs, used a little bit of my own money and that gift money. And I realized that I hated, and I was always anal as a kid about this kind of stuff too, but I really hated, particularly with my Jordans, getting them dirty. Because I spent a lot of money on them. To me, that was a lot of money and for some shoes, and I wanted to keep them clean. So I wanted to come up with an idea or like a film that could be sprayed on and peeled off whenever it got dirty onto shoes or any other surface. But I didn't know anything about chemistry at the time. And so one of the mentors that I had there recommended that I pivot the business to do shoe cleaning for individuals, for sneakerheads. And at first I really was not interested. I was like, I'm not going to be cleaning someone else's shoes. Like I'm not a shoe cleaner. But I pivoted and I swallowed my pride and I did it. And what I ended up doing was I was cleaning, conditioning, and repairing shoes for not only sneakerheads, but also the local university sports teams from all the major universities in Philadelphia. And that became actually a pretty lucrative business. Again, I was a freshman, and for me, making $25K a month in revenue was a ton of money. So I ran the business for about 4 months, was doing really well, was trying to build a team, but was having trouble and realized that the business wasn't scalable. And at the time, there was a lot of noise, a lot of hype about nanotechnology coming out to the consumer side of the world. And at the time, again, I didn't know chemistry, but I was infatuated with what nanotech was all about. I started researching this one specific product that came out to the market that was like a spray that could be put on anything and could repel any liquid-based stain. And I was in love with it. So I purchased some, waited 4 months for it to come. It never arrived. I spent like $1,600 on a little quart. It was so expensive. And I realized, I read the safety data sheet. I realized I had to buy a full bodysuit and a respirator mask to apply it because it was carcinogenic. And eventually, 4 months down the line, I got tired of waiting for it. So I was like, what the hell is going on? And then I realized that people were complaining a lot about the product and they were back ordered and the complaints were about the ones that, the people that didn't receive the product, was that it actually dried white and ruined the texture of the fabric. So it wasn't a good product for
Oh man.
fabrics to begin with.
Yeah.
So I contacted the company. I'm like, hey, I want to cancel my order. It's been way too long. And they obliged. They give me my money back, which is fine. And I start researching nanotech right around the time that I get an opportunity to sell my business, Lick Your Soul. One of my business development partners and friend at the time was interested in buying the business back or out from me. And so it was my first exit opportunity as a freshman in high school. And I thought, why not? And it was a royalty structured deal. It wasn't a lot of cash up front, but overall I ended up making like 150K off the entire process. And so for me, it was, again, a ton of money, more money than I could ever have dreamed of at that age. And I didn't know a lot. I didn't know what to do with it necessarily. So I started researching nanotechnology and realized that I could come up with the lotus leaf effect naturally. And I was destined to kind of come up with a way to come up with a formula that would do the same thing without ruining the texture, without ruining the color, without being carcinogenic, so that you could pretty much apply it with no protective gear. And that's what I set out to do. Paid 4 different labs. I ended up having to contract multiple different labs, but paid like 4 different labs to come up with something once I, got to a certain level that I was comfortable with disclosing some information. And no one was able to do it. So I had 2 options: either give up or continue pushing on and truly make something that's really unique and patentable and something that was novel to the industry. And so that's what I ended up doing, obviously, and that's how Detrapel was born. But in the meantime, while I was building Detrapel, I still wanted to make cash, and I was draining cash by investing it into the company. So I started a valet company. I had a mentor who was the first store that took Detrapel's bottles in Philly.
Yeah.
His other business, it was a consignment store for like streetwear, but his other business was a valet company. That was his main source of income. And so I started when I turned 16. I asked if I could valet just to make some cash on the weekends and at nights and during the summer. And he said, yeah. And so I did it, and it was great. But knowing me, I said, well, what's so difficult about this? I could do this.
Yeah.
So I turned around and I actually, to be totally fair, I actually offered him a third of the company. I wanted to give him like a royalty deal so I could franchise his name and use his insurance, because I was not going to get insured at the time. And they didn't want to do it. They wanted way more money than that. And I just couldn't do it. So long story short, I started my own valet business, and that was just a cash flow business that I was running up until my freshman year of college. That was a whole difficult business, but I did that, and that was kind of the process of that business. And I started other businesses, started a couple software companies during high school, most of which failed or I just didn't pursue. And did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Tried to, at least.
Yeah. So I'm curious, with school going on, and then you're doing a lot of these businesses, or how are you managing time? Are you like just not
Yeah.
relaxing, or?
Yeah, that's for sure. So my school, Masterman, was in downtown Philly. I lived in the outskirts of Philly. It was still Philly, but it was northeast Philadelphia. So it took me about 45 minutes to an hour every day to get to school, because I had to take 2 forms of public transportation, sometimes 3, to get to school. So I had an interesting philosophy about time. Again, I opened this discussion by saying time was my most valuable asset, or time is very valuable to me. And that holds true from my earliest days, because when I was in high school, I realized that the only finite thing that I had was time. I could make money, I could lose money, but the only thing I would never regain was my time. And so I was willing to sacrifice everything to meet my goals. My goals were, first and foremost, I cared about my education a lot. So I didn't drop my grades or school. I'm a big believer in challenging yourself in terms of education, and not necessarily taking the route of dropping out if you don't need to. If you're running a business full time and you absolutely have to, it's one thing. But for many kids that drop out thinking that they're going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg, a lot of times you don't need to drop out.
Yeah.
right? Zuckerberg literally dropped out because by the time that he was in his sophomore, junior year, the business was taking off quite a lot, and he needed to focus full time. So also, he's not the best example as someone who's dropping out because he dropped out of Harvard. But my
Yeah, yeah.
my point is that, you know, there are pros and cons to every situation, and there's timing for everything. Timing is important. And so for me, my education was super important. My businesses were really important to me, and my athletics were really important to me. I was an athlete my whole life, and I spent a lot of time perfecting my craft because soccer was what got me out of trouble when I was a kid. You know, because I grew up in a rough neighborhood, and a lot of my friends that I grew up with are either dead or I don't know what's up with them, or in jail. And so I just didn't grow up in a good area. I was an inner city kid, so soccer for me was my outlet to not get in trouble. Other than, you know, being raised well, and eventually my parents moved out of that area, but nonetheless, you know, that was kind of my main motivation. I wanted to be an athlete, so I wasn't interested in social life. I still to this day, I've never smoked anything. I don't drink. You know what I mean? Like for me,
Yeah.
I wasn't interested. A lot of my peers in high school started partying, going out, you know, trying alcohol, nothing crazy, but nonetheless, I just wasn't interested. So the sacrifice that I made first and foremost was the social life, and I knew that. That didn't mean I didn't have friends and I didn't network. It's just I was very keen on who I spent my time with and who I was giving up, you know, my precious minutes with. And the other thing was I forced myself to learn really good time management skills. I used a planner, a physical planner at the time. I didn't have like an iPhone, when I wasn't big on the calendar app. But I used an actual physical planner, and I wrote out my entire day every single day. So I would do like math homework for 45 minutes. Then I'd legitimately say, okay, I've got a 15-minute break for food, then 45 minutes for this homework, 45 for that, and then the rest of the time was like the business. And so while I was on my, like, for example, school would finish, right? I would run if I was going home, and most of the time I didn't. I had a lot of clubs I was involved with. But if I was going home, I would run to the train, and, you know, that's a 45-minute ride. And most people would just relax, go on their phone, go on Instagram at the time, or Facebook. I didn't care for that. I mean, I had all those things, but I knew that 45 minutes was a lot of time for me to finish my homework, or at least a portion of my homework. So I would literally do my homework right on the train. I'd finish a portion of it, go home, finish the rest of it, eat, and then do the business stuff or whatever else I had going on. So I was very good at time management. And that's kind of what got me through most of my high school career.
Talk to me about you know, in what you just said, there's an aspect of not caring about other people's opinions, right? Because I think a lot of
Yeah.
people, you know, when you talk about the social life, especially, you know, FOMO comes up.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
you know, how? I mean, I guess is it just you were so driven that these you didn't hold these, like, you know, going to parties that like how did you gain that as a high schooler, the ability to kind of drive that noise away and not have FOMO or not be self-conscious about that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I was just very motivated. And I guess the few main things that I took into account was, one, again, I didn't want to be like everyone else. I wanted to be different. And I really meant that. I can touch on a story about, actually, I had this conversation with uh, another college freshman that reached out to me to mentor him. And I had our first call yesterday, and I gave him the same kind of spiel that I always do to anyone who wants mentorship, is that, like, you've got to be serious. And for me, I realized that when I was meeting new people, the reason why I got so much free help, so many people were willing to help me, like, you know, like venture capitalists, business owners, whoever, they were willing to give me so much time of their day. And I was bewildered why so many people wanted to help just some random or high school student. And I realized it was because I was actually willing to put in the immense amount of time reciprocated back. So first and foremost, whenever I asked someone, I actually proved and showed that I wasn't wasting their time. I took into account what they were saying. Whether I took the advice or not, I would come up with counterpoints or points to support what they were telling me. And I would share those points. I would say, this is what I'm thinking, and I appreciate you telling me this. And this is what my initial thoughts are. What do you think? And that was, like, showing dedication to actually taking in their feedback. And then after that, I was a very big proponent in giving back. And so my way of giving back was doing these unpaid internships. I was willing to do unpaid internships my entire, high school career, even while I was running a business or in school, because I was willing to learn and get paid on free advice. And that is what I found way more valuable than the short-term cash that I could have made, if someone was even willing to pay me as a high school student. So that was kind of my initial outlook on kind of being different. And then I realized that, again, like for me, I just wanted to be on a different trajectory. I didn't care for the short-term fun that I would have versus the long-term negatives that would come around with that. Like a day wasted is a day wasted. It's a day I could have been making sales calls or perfecting my pitch or something else. So for me, I realized that, all these people I know, they've been spending all these years doing what they're doing to perfect what they're doing and to make it. Well, why would I waste all this time trying to make it, 5 years from now when I could be partying now, as opposed to just starting now, forgetting everything else, and then partying when I'm, 30 or 40 years old, which I know I won't do anyway, because I love what I love working. So, yeah, I mean, the point is that I think you just have to make sacrifices, and FOMO is one thing. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm insecure about some things myself still to this day, and was back then for sure. I definitely wanted to be liked. Sure, but like I found the right time for that. I found the right group for that. For me, I cared about my close small group of close friends versus being friendly with everyone or having friends everywhere. It's funny, like there's the famous quote, show me your 5 closest friends and I'll tell you who you are. But legitimately, if you look at my 5 closest friends, they're all different. They're not friends with each other because they're all different. They don't get along. And what I attribute that to is that I found a time and a place for everything, not necessarily for partying, but I had friends who partied. That's all they did. The reason why is I didn't discriminate. I didn't care what other people were doing. I just cared about what I was doing. And if people thought what I was doing was cool, great. If not, then whatever. I didn't care.
Yeah, that
I
was the
was in it
other.
for me, not for anyone else.
Yeah. I mean, that was the other thing, because I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, and I'm like, if I had started a valet business like as a freshman or sophomore, like my friends would have thought
As
I
a
was
sophomore, yeah.
I was crazy, and I, I guess, I mean, I'm not sure who was closest to you at that time. Maybe it was your mom or what, but I mean, did you just always have a supportive inner circle?
Yes and no.
Okay.
My best friend, my late best friend, unfortunately passed away.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, a few years ago. But my late best friend was an interesting support system. He was very entrepreneurial, had his own demons and stuff like that, but was very entrepreneurial, very smart, very driven kid. Just went and made the wrong choices, unfortunately,
Yeah.
with his personal life, which led him, to passing. But he was a good support system. But even again, like everyone had their support, like their place. And I was very. There's a famous book. I'm blanking on the name, but it talks about the 3 types of friendships. There's a utilitarian friendship where you're actually getting use out of the friendship. And then there's like ones for fun, and then ones for a third group. And I legitimately group my friends into buckets. Like I have friends that I will use to get something out of, and they will use me to get something out of, and we are mutually understanding of that, and that's just how it
Yeah.
is, and that's
Yeah.
fine. And then there's friends who don't bring me any benefit from a professional standpoint, whatever else. They're just there for personal fun, like just to someone to talk to or do a fun activity with on the weekend or something. Right. And I was like that in high school. So this friend of mine, for example, who's my late best friend, is a good example of, he had his own personal life. I wasn't involved in that necessarily. We were very involved in ventures and trying to run businesses together. And he was very smart. So we were just always intellectually stimulating each other. So we had many kind of coalescing components to our friendship there. But for example, he didn't understand the term mentor. He laughed when I told him that I had mentors or like many mentors. And he scoffed at the idea of mentorship for many years. He thought it was the silliest thing ever.
Okay.
And then when things kind of turned a little south for him, he actually did turn to mentorship with people that he was inspired by, and he realized that it wasn't a joke and it wasn't something silly, and it was actually something that was really beneficial. So, the point of that story is that everyone's got their own opinions and everyone's got a place to be. So, Arthur was his name, was fantastic in many ways and was really not supportive in other ways. I can point to, like my other two best friends, like Scott and Nizar. And Nizar was another masterman student. He's my only, he's one of my only close friends that I left out of masterman with. He was the senior when I was a freshman, and he kind of took me under his wing like a little brother.
Yeah.
Which was awesome because I needed that. It made me mature really quick, and I always had older friends, so it kept making me mature. But he was kind of on the later stage. He's also an immigrant and wasn't as necessarily motivated to make to take action, to execute like I was. But nonetheless, he was a good kid. He wasn't necessarily into the partying at the time in high school, and he had his own place. He was very handy. He knew how to do everything on his own. Like he could do anything from construction to electrical work with like computers and stuff. And so that was my use of him as a friend. I got a lot of fun out of being with him, and I learned a lot of personal skills. I'm very hands-on with everything, so I like to like even this morning I was replacing one of my employees' RAM on her laptop to increase the RAM.
Yeah.
And like I'm just weird like that. Like
Yeah.
I have other people that could do that, and the only reason why I did is because I've never seen this type of structure with a top and bottom case like that on a laptop. So I was curious to just do it myself and learn. That was just a personal like thing that I just wanted to learn. So, he had his use case for that, and so on and so forth. And so that's just the reality of the world, right? The sooner people realize that you have a specific need for something and people that can fill that void and that need, that's how you assess who should be with you at that certain time.
Yeah. I'm curious, as we're talking, obviously your drive and work ethic really, you know, is palpable. And I'm curious, because you're still in the game, and probably are going to be for a long, long time.
Yeah,
For
I'll never
you,
retire.
yeah, for you, what drives you? Is it a certain dollar amount, or is it? I mean, what do you? Is it you just love being, independent and being the authority of what you're running, or what's because
I
you've
certainly,
been doing this since high school, and you've got a different drive than a lot of people.
yeah, I mean, I think for me, if you asked me this question in middle school or high school, I probably would have given you a dollar amount. But as I matured and I made the dollar amounts that I was, seeking to make, maybe not like my ultimate goals, but the smaller goals, once I started meeting those goals, I realized that it wasn't about the dollar amount anymore. And it became a lot less about that. And so that's where a lot of my personal failures actually stem from, is that I was very insecure in high school. I wanted to be regarded highly or successful in business. And so for me, the way that I found the outlet for that was enlarging or embellishing certain things that I was doing, or essentially faking it till you make it, which now I'm a huge proponent against it. And I wasn't faking it to make it when in regards to like mentors or older people. I was only doing that with my peers, which, again, that was like maybe a mechanism of trying to fit in, which was wrong and didn't get me what I at the time wanted. But to reflect on that and to understand that, is I think is the more important part of the story. And so, if anyone can learn from the mistakes I made, definitely learn that one. But I think now what motivates me is two things, or one is freedom. I want to be able to walk outside my door any day and to literally do whatever I want that day. Whether it's, I want to pack up my stuff and leave vacation for the week, which would never happen. But if I wanted to, I could, or for the month, or even for half the year, I could. Or on the flip side, if I want to do something else, I could do anything I envision. And so that's the thing. I do like, I like being able to, prosper off of my business or my success or whatever. Like I like being able to do tangible things and have tangible experiences. I want to be able to do things with my wife or travel or raise my kids in the future a certain way. So for me, that all is a large motivator. I mean, I really want to be able to have true, undenounced freedom. Like I could do whatever I want, whenever I want, however I want. Not only because I'm financially free, but also because everything else is free too. And the second thing is to make a really large impact. I want to be known for something. I want to go down in the history books as an entrepreneur that made a significant change and changed the lives of many for the better. And the only reason why I care about that is because I just want to be an inspiration for other youth entrepreneurs and other youth in general. Because for me, the way that my cards were dealt, if you take out the way that I was nurtured, the way my family raised me, because I come from a very good, very strong family, and I'm very thankful for my family members for investing so much time and effort into me. I was never like a second thought. I was always the primary thing in the family, and so aside, if you take that out of the equation, which is a huge part of the equation, so I'm not discounting it, but if you take that part out of the equation, you start to realize I was dealt the same cards as any other kid was. Inner city kid. I'm not any better off than anyone else, right? Like, I mean, I had the same opportunities handed to me. I had to work for what I got. And once you start to realize that, you start to really think that you're very similar to everyone else too. The only thing that's going to distinguish you is how you take action and what you're willing to do. And so for me, if I can leave a mark on the world in that sense, and make other kids understand that and pursue their dreams, their wildest dreams, that's more than enough for me.
Yeah, that's cool to hear. So I'm probably the only interview that's taken 50 minutes to talk about Detrapel, but so
Oh, good.
talk to us about that. And you obviously mentioned it a little bit, with realizing, the other product that you were looking at required like a hazmat suit and things like that. But I think you were in the process, you mentioned, of reaching out to 4 labs, and maybe go forward from there, and what the journey's
Yeah.
been like.
Yeah. So for some background for people to understand, we're a nanotechnology-based protective coatings company. So we make all types of protective coatings, which is a massive, wide industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It could mean anything from protecting your clothing to your shoes, all the way to de-icing planes and giving longevity there, so that the planes don't ice again and break in the middle of the air. All the way to fire extinguishing foam. That's all protective coatings. So it's a huge, very wide industry. And there's many different chemistries that achieve protective coatings. We particularly focus on PFAS-free coatings. We're the only protective coatings company in the world, at least we claim to be, that has truly zero PFAS chemicals in any of our protective coatings. That includes our disinfectants, our protectors, which are notoriously known for PFAS chemicals. That's what our patent is on, actually. It's being on the first PFAS-free protective coating in the world.
Can you also tell? I mean, because I don't think people are going to know what PFAS and the effects of it
Yes.
are. Maybe just a little bit of info on that.
Yeah, PFAS is definitely gaining a lot of traction, but a lot of people still don't know what it is. Perfluorinated alkaline substances is the acronym. That's what PFAS is. It's essentially a family of 5,000 carcinogenic, or most of them are carcinogenic, chemicals. And the reason why they're carcinogenic is because they're some of the strongest bonds in chemistry. The perfluorinated bond, which is a carbon and fluoride or fluorine bond, is one of the strongest in chemistry. It's super hard to degrade, super hard to break down. And so most fluorinated chemicals, especially the even chain ones, and without getting too technical, they live in the environment for hundreds of years, maybe, I mean, there's many studies going on right now, but certainly several decades. And that leads to mutations, that leads to unforeseen chemicals being inhibited into bloodstreams, into animals, into the environment. So it's both eco harmful, but it also can lead to cancer, birth defects, and a bunch of other harmful health effects. So it's harmful to people, pets, and the planet. The problem is that PFAS chemicals, there's 5,000 families of them. And within those families are multiple chemicals of those as well. And like 99% of them are harmful. So PFAS chemicals are in almost everything that you can imagine on a daily basis. Your shirt has PFAS chemicals that have been entangled into it. Your toothpaste has fluoride into it. which is a PFAS chemical. Scotch Guard, for example, one of our biggest competitors, is a fluorinated based chemical, and almost every competitor in the space is actually every competitor in the space is,
Yeah.
unless they're alcohol based, which brings its own downsides to it. So we make water-based chemicals that are completely harmless. They're safe for people, pets, and the planet, so that you can continue to protect what you love. From the consumer side, that means your items. From the industrial side, which is the majority of our businesses, we work with manufacturers of textiles or manufacturers of upholstery, carpet manufacturers. Like I said, a military application or airplane application is a big one for us as well. You name it. I mean, we're working on it. We're making coatings for kitchen countertops and waterproofing stone and concrete for the construction industry. That's one of the beauties of having everything in house. We don't outsource a single thing in the facility that I currently am sitting in. We have literally our entire staff here. We have 4 chemical engineers on staff that work full time, and some of the brightest minds in the industry. And it's grown quite a bit. And that's one of the beauties of having absolutely everything from your R&D to your manufacturing to your fulfillment. Literally anything you can think of, we do it in house. We don't outsource it. Besides like the printing on our boxes and the labels that we import from a local company here in Mass, and then we apply it ourselves. So, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting business, interesting industry, very wide. And I was fortunate enough that we were on Shark Tank, which really picked up the business and led to what it is today.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess one question I have, that I always talk to with young entrepreneurs is the label of being young, right? And you mentioned in that intro, it sounds like you do a lot of B2B sales. I'm curious when, these other wherever it is, a textile manufacturer or something. I mean, they might be 40 to 60 years old and they're talking to some guy in their 20s. How do you um build those, and act, you know is it just a maturity thing? Is it knowing your fact? I mean, how do you make sure that they don't underestimate you and they take you seriously and things like that?
It's a great question. I've had a lot of people that reject me because of my age, but I had a lot of people that bet on me because of my age. So I'm not a big proponent on one or the other. I'm a big proponent of starting as young as you can. I think when students, or when younger people in general reach out, the most important thing is to follow up and to be abundantly clear and sincere about what your goal is and what you're trying to solve, the problem that you're trying to solve for the individual. And so whether you're 15 or you're 23 or you're 40 something, 50 something, if you can present a solid, true solution to an actual problem that the user is having, and you give them a no barrier kind of entry, the lowest barrier entry for them possible, it's a no-brainer for them, right? Give them a sample. Like for me, like I reach out now. It's not much of an issue, especially with the team that we've built. My chief research officer is literally a world-renowned chemist, so it's helpful. But before that, before I had the multiple 60 and 50 and 40-year-olds working in the company, and it was just a bunch of 20-year-olds, that at that time, it was hard, but all you need is one big fish to bite, because after that, you can go to any other fish and say, hey, I'm working with your competitor who's this guy, give us a shot, and let me put my money where my mouth is. Here's a sample. If you don't like it, no worries, we don't have to do this again.
Yeah, that's a good strategy. You mentioned pitching on Shark Tank changing a lot for you. Um, talk to us about that process of just I don't even know, like, just from pitching and things like that. How was that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been pitching for a long time
Yeah.
since I was in high school. So pitching is what I like to do. When I was a kid, I loved Shark Tank. That was one of the TV shows that I watched with my dad, and then eventually on my own at my mom's. And I really enjoyed it, and it was kind of a dream of mine to go on. I was a big fan of Mark Cuban when I was about, I think I was 15 years old when I think I was 15. So I just started Detrapel, just sold Lick Your Soul, started Detrapel, just turned 15. And right, hold on, let me make sure my numbers are right. This is the part I always mess up. I can just double check actually. Literally, I still have the email pulled up, so it's easy to check.
Yeah.
When I was, what is it? One second.
Yeah, you're good.
Everything's working slow. Okay, sorry. So I had just turned 16. So I was 15 when I started. Yeah, that's correct. I was 14 in my freshman year. 15. No, something's off. Sorry, no, I turned 15 my freshman year of high school. And then I turned 16 my sophomore year. So right before my 16th birthday is when I kind of started, or a couple months before my 16th birthday is when I started when I started Detrapel, and I officially incorporated it. And when I was doing the research, it took a few months before I got like a minimal viable product that I was okay to go to market with. And so in February of 2000, and I think I already moved away from it, but I think that's 2014. Yeah. I decided, again, Mark Cuban was one of my inspirations in terms of like some of the stuff and how he ran his business and how he started it. So I just thought it was a smart idea to learn what email hunting was. It was one of the skills I learned in one of my internships. I learned how to email hunt with like a data-driven model, like actually being able to hack or code or however you want to classify it. Data mine is actually the proper way to classify it. Data mine for emails. And so I mined his email, found his email, and sent him a cold email. And the guy responded to me. This is Mark Cuban. So
yeah.
when I emailed him and he got the response, I was like, wow, this is insane. And there's a little backstory how I ended up doing it. But the point is that when he got back to me, it was like a dream come true for a little kid. And eventually I told him I wanted to apply to Shark Tank. He introduced me to casting producers. They followed the story for about 4 years. And when I was finally ready to apply, I applied and I was accepted to go on the show. We filmed as one of the more successful episodes in history, which was nice. Yeah, I mean, we struck a deal with Mark and Lori on air, which was a fantastic experience, super nerve-wracking. But the deal, I mean, I can go into the deal details, but one thing that Shark Tank did, as I mentioned, was that once the episode aired and once all these millions of people saw the episode, it changed the life of the company. It legitimized us, and that's what it really did for us. It allowed me to finally build a team, not just of 20-year-olds that were able to make the sacrifice of not having a good salary or any salary. And at the time, there was 4 or 5 of us. And I went through a lot of team members through my years, and that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
But that's when I realized, okay, I can finally hire some real employees, some 30-year-olds, so some gray hairs, some people who have experience, and that's what I want. I cared about people who have been in the trenches before, and so that's what Shark Tank did for me, and it just legitimized the company, and that's kind of the best experience I could have asked for.
Yeah. Are you so are they partners in this business?
No, many deals actually do not close. Okay. I can't speak about the statistics because I mean it's actually public, so I guess I could. But there's about 40,000 applications a year. 150 of them are invited to actually film. Out of the 150 that film, 90 of those air on TV. Out of the 90 that air, 45 appear to get deals, and 45 roughly do not. And approximately, I mean, it's estimated numbers, but that's kind of, this is literally, you can Google these numbers, but about 75% of the deals that appear to close do not actually close after due diligence. So once you get the deal on air, once you film, because it's a real show. I mean, it's not scripted. So when you walk in, the sharks don't know anything about you. You walk in, you give them your pitch. If you get a deal, you get a deal. Sometimes the average deal takes, I think they said 90 minutes to close. The one before me was 3 hours long. Oh, mine was 30 minutes long, 32 minutes long. So it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
But long story short, for us, when we were getting the deal, I was just infatuated with getting Mark and Lori, and I got offers from 4 out of 5 sharks, so it was a great experience. But for me, I particularly really wanted to kind of develop a real partnership, and so I came in there with real offering. Like I undervalued the companies tremendously because I had just raised some money for my pre-seed round right before the show, just in case a deal didn't work and I needed inventory. So I had it raised from other investors, and that was my first take on getting real money into the company. And when the deal started kind of going through the due diligence, it didn't materialize. They saw the discrepancies, and the deal didn't work for us because the deal terms changed as well after what we agreed to. And so all those things together, they passed in the deal, and there was no hard feelings.
Yeah.
And I'm still in touch with them. I've sent out emails to both of them and their teams in the past, and everything's on good terms, but it just didn't work out. And you know what, it worked really well for us, so I'm not complaining about it.
Yeah. I guess for you, especially now, as you've as you talked about, are managing 40, 50, 60 year olds and chemical engineers. um Talk about managing someone older than you, and then also talk about maybe, you know, some managing someone with more, chemistry expertise, and how do you handle that stuff?
It's a great question. It's a weird, or not weird, it's not the right term, but it's a inspiring and simultaneously a hard kind of prospect to one, understand that you're hiring people that are twice, if not almost 3 times your age, that are older than my parents. But on the flip side, it's also interesting to see what they believe in me. Why do they say yes? Because, like, for example, my chief research officer and his wife who work here, who are in their 60s, early 60s, late 50s, but they literally relocated from Ohio. And the guy's like the former vice president of Rust-Oleum, which is a multi-billion-dollar company, was part of Sherwin-Williams, the paint company. I mean, he's literally world-renowned for some of his work. And he's the one that pitched us to come relocate. So I was just like, it was a little shocking, but the good part to it is that for whatever reason, some people, just really believe in us and in me and then the company. And I back up my work. I truly work the way I preach and stuff like that. So I think people see that. It's interesting managing those types of people. For the thing is that people understand I'm the founder, I'm the CEO, so I'm their boss. So they get that point. The hard part is like when you've developed, especially when we were a smaller team, now we're at 17, so it's a little bit larger. When we were at like sub 10, like sub 8, when we were 7 people, because we had some layoffs, some people left, and then we hired a very experienced staff. The difficult part is when you become friends with people, and that boundary can sometimes kind of get meddled. And so I'm very blunt and I'm very straightforward. I think communication is very, very key. You have to understand, other people and be empathetic to everyone's situation. So when someone, for example, a good friend of mine who was a friend first before he became an employee of the company was one of our operations managers, and he'll often make like a joke or say a comment as a friend would, to me, and he knows his place, and he's been pulled aside several times by me to tell him, hey, there's a place for when you can talk to me like that. This isn't the place or the time to do that, though.
Yeah.
And so, people just understand the boundaries. You have to establish those boundaries, and friendship is nice, but there's work and there's friendship, and there's 2 different times and places for that. And so Jeff is the operation manager, is a great spokesperson for this. He'd easily advocate for this. I'm a completely different person outside of work than I am when I'm inside the office. When I'm outside the office, it's like, a whole 180-degree difference. And here it's completely different than that. So I don't come to play at work. So I come to get to work. But at the same time, I'm very culture driven. So at the same time that we have boundaries, people also understand that we are like a legitimate family here. We really try to act like that. We do family or team events every week. It's very culture driven here as well. So that stuff's important to me. And I think people enjoy that and respect that. And though I'm 23 now, and some of these people have been with me for years now, they've seen the progression, and I'm not a traditional 23-year-old, not just because I'm balding, but for other reasons too. Like there are many reasons why I think someone, when they look at me, they forget that. Like a great example is my COO, who sits right next to me, who's on another call over there, but he's older than my parents. He just turned 50 this past week, and he's got multiple exits under his belt. Why he was originally just a mentor for me, and again pitched me to join the company. And it made sense at the time. He's been here for over 2.5 years now, so it's been a great ride. But he's a great example of, sometimes he'll like ask me, "Oh, do you know about this?" I go, "No, what's that?" And he'll say, "Oh, I'm forgetting. Like, you're 23. Like, you haven't had the chance to even experience. You weren't even alive when this was happening."
Yeah.
People sometimes tend to forget, because I'm in the weeds with everything, and I do have a lot of knowledge because I've been doing this for so many years, about the various different aspects of the business. And more importantly, I'm always learning. I'm trying to learn anything and everything I can.
Yeah.
With the chemical guys, that's a great question too, because to manage someone technical when they're more technical than you is tough. I think you have to understand, like, I understand chemistry well, enough to, because I understand our chemistry, and I researched it quite a lot. So in that sense, I can hold my own. I can have the conversations. That's not the problem. But for example, Tarek's a good example, my COO, who knows very little about chemistry. And, for him to, because he's the second in command, essentially, for him to manage our other members of the chemical engineering staff or the chemical staff, might be difficult at times, because he doesn't necessarily know if, what they're saying makes sense. But the culture that we've built here is we question everything. Like, why? Give me the reason as to why this makes sense, or why this, means that. And I think because of that, the team has developed a very understanding basis of each other, and we know how to present each other the right facts or the right things, and we challenge each other. And I challenge my team when someone tells me, like, I remember when our junior chemist, our junior chemical engineer, joined the company. Within the first maybe 4 to 6 months, he was working on a major project, and he hit a pretty serious wall. And he told us, like, "Hey, there's no way around this wall. Like, we have to either go into fluorochemistry or make sacrifices elsewhere." And we said, "Absolutely not. Like, this is what we do. This is our unique ability. Redesign the project, start again." And we just don't take no for an answer. I mean, it's just, and with that in mind, our staff understands what we're trying to do. We're trying to be on the cutting edge of technology, ahead of everyone else. We don't have room and space and time to be giving no as an answer.
Yeah. Today, what are the challenges, and then what's going well on the flip side?
What's going well?
What are the challenges, and then on the flip side, what are
okay.
what's going well?
Yeah, I mean, every day is a challenge, right? I mean, you've got a lot of growing pains when you're growing at this rate, and at the size that we're trying to grow to. Everything's a challenge. Everything from getting more sales in, making sure that everything is working in the back. Managing people is definitely the hardest part. Making sure that everyone's on task, that we're not slipping through the cracks, and people know their priorities and what needs to get done first. That's definitely the largest challenge. But challenges are made to be, addressed. So we try to do that efficiently. On the flip side, what's going well is that we have, again, a really, really strong and good team. We have some amazing research coming out of here. We just had a research study published through Northeastern University that showcased that our protectors, when applied to fabric masks, make them as good, if not more effective, than 3M surgical grade N95 masks. So you can just apply our protector on your mask, still breathe in it, and literally it could be a fabric mask. Like, I wear a fabric mask here at work, which is in my jacket, because I have it sprayed with my product. I know it's even more effective than a 3M N95 mask. So things like that. I mean, we're really pushing real technology. Our investors are super happy. We've raised additional capital since SharkTank. So, all of that stuff on the flip side is that people believe in us, and things are shaping. We've built a strong foundation for what we do, and we're just trying to execute on that now. So we're getting interest, and that's encouraging.
Um, I guess what do you hope for the vision? I don't know if you can look out that far, but like 2, 3, 5, 10 years from now, what do you hope?
Yeah, I mean, uh, from a hope perspective, I hope we're public, but
Oh,
or sell the company by then, but uh, for many reasons. But the reason why I say that is because we want to have a huge footprint in the world, right? And so for us, what that means is we really got to be a dominating player in synthesizing particles from the ground up, being an upstream manufacturer, which is the stuff that you only hear, like the DuPonts, the Dow chemical companies. Those are the guys that do that type of stuff, where they're actually physically joining different types of atoms and making particles right there. That's where we want to be, and that's where we'd like to be. Doing it in our own facility. That's the only part that we don't do. We don't synthesize our own particles because you need multi-million-dollar machines for that, and we just can't afford those yet. But we do everything else in that sense, on the chemical side. And most companies don't synthesize. So, but the goal is, that's kind of the next step, is to build a strong foundation in all these different industries, expand the Protect What You Love brand, and understand that we're applicable in so many different markets, so that we can tackle those markets and start seeing some serious returns, so we can reinvest into the business. And so for us, that's kind of like the next view, is just to grow in size and sales. Our manufacturing capabilities are insane. We have a beautiful 40,000 square foot facility that we were just moving into, and 2 fully automated lines that we invested millions of dollars into this past year. It's that side of the business is great. Now we just need to fill those machines and hit the capacity
yeah.
and start producing a lot of products. So that's kind of where we're at. I mean, I'm hoping that it continues to grow and become a household brand and the go-to choice for safe chemicals for everyone.
Yes. You mentioned raising capital. Um, was that just any words of advice on that? And it was it a private round?
Yeah.
Okay. All
We're a
right.
private company.
Yeah.
Yeah, we raised with a few institutional angel investors, angel groups, slash venture capital. We did a seed round in 2019, in August of 2019, for $1 million, which was like the first injection of real money into the company. But since then, we've done multiples in revenue. So since then, we've been sustaining ourselves just based on revenue and profits, which is good.
Yeah.
But for us, I guess the best piece of advice I could offer when raising capital is just do as much outreach as possible. Literally, like, reach out to every single person you can about investment, because unfortunately, and some people might get mad at me, but a lot of VCs and a lot of investors are full of shit. No one knows what they want. They'll say one VC or one investor will tell you one thing, and the next one was the same size, same experience, same everything, just different people. In the next meeting, 20 minutes later, will tell you the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And that's happened multiple times for us. So, every situation is different. Don't get discouraged. The best, piece of advice is, don't get discouraged when you're going to get a no, because you're going to get a lot of them. That's why you got to cast a wide net and email as many people as possible. And just build genuine relationships with people, understand what their perspectives are and what they're interested in from an investment perspective, and vice versa, if you can fit those criteria. If you can, then great. There might be an opportunity for you to raise capital. If you cannot, that's fine. Go find someone else and maintain that relationship for future benefits. So, the best advice I have is just, you got to cast a wide net, and don't get discouraged, because you're definitely going to hear so many different things. And the best part, or the best thing to do, is definitely apply those things and make sure that you listen to the feedback. And if you agree with the feedback, implement the feedback, especially multiple people tell you it. Otherwise, graciously take the feedback and say thank you, and move on.
Yeah. One other question I had was, managing your personal life. I'm just talking to you, and you got a lot of things. You've got your investors, you got the operations of the business, you got the sales of the business. I mean, um, you recently got married, so uh, you've been managing, you know, to do your personal life pretty well. Um, while your business is growing. Um, any pieces of advice on how you've been able to manage those two aspects?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the same exact principles that I applied in business I applied to my personal life. Everything's on a time management schedule. Everything's got to be on a calendar. Um, I just know my priorities, and I think that's something I didn't mention that's important. A priority audit for yourself is gravely important. I think any individual who's serious about anything, about themselves, or literally anything, needs to do a priority audit and understand what level certain things in their life should come at. So if social life is important to you, that's a priority, fine, so be it. That's your priority, and you have to rank it against your other priorities. For me, my number one priority is my family. My second priority is my business, and they're almost at the same exact level.
Yeah.
And I'm honest about that, and they know that. I mean, I dedicate my life to my company, and similarly, the only other time I have left is dedicated to my family. Anything else caught afterward can be split for other things. Fortunately, I made decisions and I was just very communicative and open about how I operate as a person, because I'm just different. I'm weird. I embrace that, and I like to be that way. I don't want to be ordinary, and so I'm openly communicative. Like, these are my hobbies. This is what I like to do. I love to learn. I want to learn something new every month. I only have like one day out of the week that I can do that because I work every other day. And so that day is like day that I can dedicate for that. If I have other things that come up, then those things take priority. But I have a very systematic approach to what I do. And so because of that, I think my relationships in my personal life and my friendships have flourished because I'm openly communicative about that. And I'm not trying to blow smoke up people's butt. I mean, I'll tell my wife, like, for us, like, my relationship with my wife is very important to me because that's my partner, and we do everything together, minus this business. But like, any available time outside of work, because she makes the same sacrifices I do, especially for me. We spend time together, and we try to learn things that we're both interested in, which is sometimes hard to do. And if we're not both interested in it, it's okay. One of us will take the sacrifice if needed, or just won't do it. And then if we find time, for other things, we'll do other things. Like, I mean, I still have friends that I hang out with. Don't get me wrong. But most of that time is either I'm hanging out with them, doing an activity or doing an experience that I want to learn, or something else, or it's just truly just relaxing. Because if I need like a day out of the month or something to just truly relax once in a while, I'll take it if I need it. And that's pretty much it, man. I mean, like,
I mean, but she understands. I guess she understands how much of a drive you have and how
oh yeah,
important work is to you. I think
yeah.
it seems like
And
that
but
understanding is there between you two.
yeah, and the only reason why that understanding is there is because in the beginning of our relationship, after the first like 6 to 8 months, we started getting into arguments. We were both in college. We were by then we were our sophomores. We started dating. Today's actually our 4-year anniversary,
Oh wow,
um,
congrats.
since we started dating. But we met on during school, on the first day of school, and we started dating our first day of second semester. And then within like 6 to 8 months or so, we started getting into a few arguments and disagreements. Uh, and here's another facet about like me. I'm not afraid to like be personal. I'm happy to spill my personal life too, although I don't talk about it normally. Like, if someone asks me, I will. That's a thing I like other people to learn from, or to seize that. I'm happy to disclose my personal life because I'm hoping that someone can
Learn from
work
it.
off of the mistakes that I had,
Yeah.
because that's how I learned from others. And so, yeah, when we started getting into disagreements, the next step was, okay, take a step back and start and this is also because I'm very big into like empathy. I'm a big believer in like culture, and like empathy in general is an important skill I think that people need to learn. Um, and that's when I realized, okay, take a step back. What's most important to my wife, right? Or at the time, my girlfriend. What's so important to her? Why is she upset? Understand what drives her and her motivating factors, and then address those to her, listen to her and hear her out, and then give her my side of the story. And so for me, when we started getting into arguments, and it was mostly about my time, about her not feeling, like her feeling as an afterthought or something else, or not getting the time dedicated to her. And that was largely due to me focusing on the business. And what that took was getting to the root of our understanding of each other, which was for me in my position. I distinctly remember this conversation that we had in the library at Bath in college, where I was explaining to her, like, for me, why work is so important to me, why work is effectively what most people would say everything to me, is because it's the key to all the other things that she wants or I want, like having a freedom of life and having a beautiful family and being able to do and provide for your family and whoever else you want at any time you want. I understand that that's going to take a lot of success or a lot of time to build, and so I'm willing to put in that time now. And when we started talking like that and understanding the root of each other and where our motivating factors come from, and just truly trying to empathize with each other and putting ourselves into each other's shoes, that's when things got abundantly clear. And things haven't been, I don't think we've ever had an argument since then. I still can't point to any other argument.
Yeah.
It's solely due to communication. Like I'm just a big believer in communicating your honest self, and understand. You have to really peel back layers of many onions to really truly understand yourself to the core. And only when you do that can you express that to someone else and also provide for someone else. So I was ready for that type of relationship in my life at the time, and I guess so was she. And so things worked out, and even to this day, we still talk about certain things like that.
Yeah.
What's important to us.
The other question I had was, with the work ethic that you have, how do you make sure that you don't burn out, or like, what's that balance of like, I can work, 12 hours for 5 days a week, or maybe I should bring it down to 10, or you know what I mean? Like
I
how
wish
do
it was
you,
12.
how do you balance, because that's a huge part of, it's an everyday thing. So you need some time to relax and recover and
For sure.
do things. You know, do you have any
Yeah,
secrets?
I'm a horrible example for this. So I'll give what I do as an example, but by no means is it at all representative of what other people should do. I'm just notoriously bad at that. I've experienced burnout before. I've learned to identify when I have. So my secret, so to speak, now is that I can identify when I'm about to have a burnout. And for me, since I got married, or since I was in my relationship, some of my priorities switched. And for me, relaxing just a day out of the month, like I mentioned, once in a while, meaning like literally just sitting at home and not doing anything, or like doing whatever, could be one way of just blowing off the steam. The other way is like trying to get away and traveling, although that even stresses me out more. So I've had the opportunity to travel quite a bit, most recent times, but most of that's been for work anyway. So I can't really speak to that, but I understand what helps me calm down, or just being self-aware, I guess. I'm aware of when I'm potentially going to do a burnout, and I'll scale back on a couple of different things for that week or something like that. Prior to COVID, a big thing for me was being active and working out. Since COVID, I haven't literally stepped into the gym, and I've gotten overweight because of that. But before that was a really good component of de-stressing. Now it's incredibly difficult. I can't point to any specific things besides just literally having to disconnect for like a day, like on a Sunday or a Saturday, maybe once every month or two.
Are you able to turn off like on the weekends? Are you able to not think
No,
about the business?
no.
Okay.
And it
Yeah.
doesn't help that I live 5 minutes away from my office.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm notoriously bad at this. I've never like there's even a whole running story here in the company that 2 years ago, I 2.5 years ago actually, something like that, I think. Yeah, almost 2.5 years ago, I went to Norway with my wife, again at the time girlfriend. She lived in Norway prior to attending Babson, and we visited Norway, we visited Lithuania. So I was on a trip. And again, it was supposed to be my vacation. At the time, we were moving from our previous facility, which was a very small facility in Holliston, Mass, to where we are now in Framingham, Mass. And I wasn't here for the move, so I was stressing the hell out. I mean, it was, we were growing as a team. It was everything was new. I was super stressed, and I'm notoriously horrible for disconnecting ever. And the one time that I need to disconnect, when I'm international, I'm not even on the same time zone. Here I am, I'm literally working through the day or at night, like at like 2 a.m. in Norway time, so that, or prior to that, so that everyone who's still here at work can work with me. And then I'm working in the morning when I'm supposed to be on vacation. So I was working there, and this is like literally the story of my life. I was just, another good example is I was just skiing in Stowe the previous week in Vermont. Actually, no, that was before the new year. Oh my God, it's more than a month ago already.
Yeah.
Feels like a week ago.
Yeah.
And same thing, we went there for a week to disconnect and vacation, which I'm horrible at this. And I literally worked 6 out of the 7 days that I was there. We went skiing one day, and that's just because
That's
of
awesome.
work.
That's funny.
I mean, we did other things at like
Yeah.
night and stuff like that, so we were able to disconnect on that in that sense. But yeah, for me, I'm incredibly horrible at disconnecting. So my trip in Norway, I was working. Then we went on a trip inside the entire country from one end to the other, and we were like on a ship in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the country, going through the fjords. And I'm stressing about not having reception.
Yeah.
So like, for me, I'm able to enjoy the other things. Like, don't get me wrong, when I'm on vacation, like I'm enjoying scenery, everything else, and I can take time to relax. It's just not necessarily during core working hours. I have trouble, and that was my first time when I was on that trip with the fjords and stuff. That was the first time I have ever turned off my phone for more than like a couple hours. It was
Yeah.
for a full 24 hours, and I was stressing it.
That's funny. We talked about quite a bit. Was there was there anything that you wanted to hit on that we didn't?
I think this is the most in depth I've gone into an interview in a while.
Okay, awesome.
So
That's
I'm
good.
hoping this is gonna be some good content for the viewers.
Yes, no, it is. It's great to learn from a young entrepreneur that's doing well and will continue to do well. A lot of good learning points in this one. So
Hopefully,
so thank you.
hopefully someone learned something.
Yeah,
At
yeah,
least one person.
yeah. They will. Uh, if you have nothing else, you know, David, I just want to acknowledge you, and as I said, wherever you get it from, I don't know, but it's amazing how you've turned, like, you haven't let your lack of money growing up dictate, you know, where you are going to end up in life. And you've worked for everything you've gotten and, networked and all that. And now what you're doing, um, an eco-friendly, biodegradable, water-based, non-flammable, non-corrosive, spray and oh, that was one thing we didn't for anybody that might want to be a B2C consumer. What are the things you have on the site that they can buy?
We got a bunch of stuff. We have all of our protectors. So we have stuff for clothing, furniture, accessories, you name it. You can protect it from liquid-based stains, like essentially prolong the life of your belongings, and also don't waste money by cleaning them when you can prevent this stuff from happening in the first place. The other stuff we have, if people are interested during the pandemic, is we have disinfectants and hand sanitizers. We have a few other products that are releasing in the next few months. So depending on when this launches, we may or may not have a stain remover that's world class. I've never seen anything work like it. so on and so forth. So we'll have some cool products coming out on the consumer side that we're rolling out this year.
Yeah, yeah. And I didn't even so Forbes 30 under 30 for a reason. So David, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck with everything going forward.
Thank you.
Awesome.